Hey, it's your worst waifu, here to talk about anime delinquent girls. Japan is known for being very safe and has a relatively low crime rate. However, in the 70s to 90s, they had a very iconic delinquent subculture. And of course, the subculture often shows up in anime as exaggerated stereotypes. The first delinquent female character I ever saw in something from Japan was actually not from an anime. It was actually back when I watched this quirky comedy movie known as Kamikaze Girls in the West. In Japan, the movie is called Shimotsuma Monogatari Yankee-chan to Rorita-chan. This is a movie about two girls from two very different subcultures. We have a Lolita and we have a Yankee, or delinquent. Yankee-chan refers specifically to Ichigo. Ichigo is a rude biker girl who smokes and basically just lives by her own moral code. Like her nickname implies, Yankee-chan, she embodies what a Yankee is. So what exactly is a Yankee? Yankee is a term coined in Osaka that has been used since the late 70s to refer to delinquent youths. To be clear, this word does not mean Americans or Yankees. Actually, in reality, there is a kind of relation, but for the most part, it doesn't matter when we're talking about delinquent characters in anime. Yankee-type characters are often shown squatting like they're taking a dump, smoking cigarettes. They often have like shaved eyebrows, dyed hair. Their school uniforms are always a mess, and they basically just look like they're up to no good. Oh, they also like to wear sick masks. Not all delinquents may necessarily be Yankee, but this is because Yankee is a subculture. They have their own attitudes, mannerisms, and things like this that often would show up in comics, manga, anime, and TV shows in Japan. The word Yankee can apply to boys and girls. Lots of anime have leading male characters that are Yankee, but it's less common for girls, although they do exist if you do some digging. For Yankee girls in anime, the telltale signs are dyed hair, jackets, longer skirts, and a distinct rough way of talking, considering that a lot of anime girls talk like this. You will be able to spot the rough ones, even if you don't speak Japanese, especially if you hear any "ha" type sounds. It's very, very distinct. There are some amazing examples of these characters in anime. Let's take some time to look at the most famous ones now. Starting with one of my personal favorites, Ryuko from Kill la Kill. Ryuko is a clear-cut example of a female delinquent character. She has that distinct, rough way of talking, is strong, has streaked hair, and dresses the part. She also does a pretty decent delinquent squat too. If she would put her damn heels down. I gotta find out who killed my dad. Having a difficult family situation is very common for Yankee-type characters, which makes sense and may be partially why they are so rough around the edges. One reason I think Yankee characters are so cool is they often have complicated motivations like vengeance. Ryuko is no exception to this, as she physically fights to unravel the mystery of her father's death. In lots of anime, girls aren't often given this kind of motivation, and personally, like girls or not, I just love to see characters fired up and kicking booty. Another more recent example of a Yankee girl is Kaji Ryoko from Tsurezure Children. Tsurezure Children is a romantic comedy, which is actually a surprisingly popular place for Yankee characters to show up. And that's because they have like a strong gap moe, and what I mean by gap moe is essentially they can be surprisingly cute. And that surprise you get by how cute a delinquent is makes them even cuter to you. Gap moe is how some people feel about tsundere, and delinquent characters often when they are in love, they are tsundere. So with that said, let's meet Kaji, our tsundere Yankee girl. Kaji is constantly being flirted with by her school's president, and her reaction is to act tough, tease him, and act like she is very experienced, with high-impact hand-holding. There's a scene in the anime where she says she would sell her body for cash, and then of course he asks her, "What's your price?" She immediately becomes flustered and blushes. Yankee characters tend to be surprisingly naive and conservative when it comes to dating. They generally don't try to work on their physical attractiveness, and dress conservatively as well. The most notable example of this is they often wear their school uniforms with longer skirts than the rest of the cast. Next delinquent. Saki from Zombieland Saga is a delinquent idol who is also a zombie who loves her Tamagotchi, and yeah, Zombieland Saga is kind of weird. Even if Saki is a little offbeat, she is still very much a delinquent, a Yankee, but she's also a part of the Bosozoku subculture. So, what's Bosozoku? Bosozoku literally means reckless speeding tribe. And the only main difference between Yankee and Bosozoku is that Bosozoku own motorcycles and are often in biker gangs. These biker gangs are mostly teens from ages 15 to 20. It is quite common for Yankee to also be Bosozoku, like how Saki was. She's a delinquent and she rides a bike and is in a gang. However, this is not the case for all delinquents. Bosozoku often wear long embroidered jackets that have their gang logos and slogans on them. Then they'll go on these long rides with their gangs into the night, on flashy bikes that have ear-splittingly loud exhaust pipes. Zombieland Saga actually gives us a peek into what delinquent culture looks like now in Japan, and in the current day anime scene. This is because Zombieland Saga came out in 2018 and is set in 2018. Saki was born in 1979 and died in 1997. In the late 90s, Yankee and Bosozoku subculture was still thriving, and Saki is an embodiment of that culture at that time. However, since the 90s, it has been kind of dwindling out. In an episode that focuses on Saki, we can see that in 2018, the sizes of biker gangs has become smaller and smaller, which is true of Japan today. I mean, they still exist, they're just not as popular. There are actually lots of terms used to describe female delinquents, and I keep using the word Yankee because it's very encompassing. But if you did some of your own research and did some digging, you'd probably come across the word Sukeban. The term Sukeban comes from the 70s and was popular before the word Yankee, and is outdated now. Sukeban literally means boss girl, but it relates to the phenomenon of all-girl gangs that was biggest in the mid-70s. At one point in time, there was an all-girl gang that had 20,000 members in it. Like really, think about that. That's a huge crime syndicate. However, the time of these massive all-girl gangs is gone now. It's outdated. Although I want to say it isn't really wrong to say a character is Sukeban if they are from that time period. Similar how like we could say, you know, like an anime has samurai in it. Same with Sukeban. They're from a specific time period, they have an iconic look, iconic style, they still could exist in fiction. The most popular use of the word Sukeban in the anime world would be when we talk about the influential manga and OVA series called Sukeban Deka. It also spawned a ton of live action movies. People love the Sukeban image. Sukeban Deka is a story from the 70s about a delinquent girl named Saki, and Saki basically works undercover for the police. And why would a delinquent help the police? Blackmail, of course. Basically, the police say to her, you know what, your mom's on death row. If you don't want her to die as soon, if you make a deal with us, help us solve some mysteries, we won't kill your mom as soon. Like, we'll extend her execution date. And so Saki begrudgingly agrees to that, and thus, Yo-Yo Cop Girl is born. She actually beats the ever-living crap out of people with a yo-yo. I mean, that doesn't sound very cool, but she makes it cool. Because Sukeban came before Yankee, you can see how Sukeban influenced Yankee. Sukeban girls were known for their pride, rules of conduct, and honor, and also for always wearing their altered school uniforms, even outside of school. This really helped influence this idea of the bad schoolgirl image. Sukeban Deka specifically influenced Kill la Kill. Ryuko and Saki both have difficult family lives and fight with strange weapons. The shows also both have heavy themes of girl rivalry and companionship. This isn't just my opinion though. The ending theme of Kill la Kill is actually a parody of Sukeban Deka's live-action ending theme. That's how deep this influence goes. I also can't help but think that Saki from Zombieland Saga sharing the same name as Saki from Sukeban Deka probably isn't a coincidence. As a final point, I want to talk about what happens when these characters grow up. A common assumption is that when these delinquent characters grow up, they join the yakuza, But in reality, in anime and in real life, this just isn't very common. Generally, once a delinquent turns 20, which is the age of being an adult in Japan, they quit their delinquent lifestyle and try to integrate into society. They often do this by finding work or getting married. Yankee culture is unique because it's an act of teenage rebellion. Once these characters grow up and become adults, they stop doing things that would get them seriously in trouble with the law. This idea of growing up and stop being a Yankee is so common that they even have something called like a yanmama, which is essentially a Yankee who quits being a Yankee to become a mom, yanmama. Now mind you, this word is often also used for young mothers, but there's basically two meanings there. My favorite example of this is actually Toru's mom from Fruits Basket. Basically, her mom's this huge sweetheart that used to be in an all-girl biker gang. Fruits Basket is actually being rebooted this year, so if you want to see a yanmama, you know what to watch. So just remember, Sukeban are female girl gangs and gang members from the 60s and 70s. A Yankee is an all-encompassing word for delinquent youths from the 70s until now, and Bosozoku are teenage motorcycle gangs. I did verify these terms with some of my friends from Japan, and unanimously I found that Sukeban is outdated. I kind of see it similar to the word like samurai. I mean, of course we can find them in fiction. You wouldn't use the word, I guess, in real life. Honestly, it's hard to find some of this information in English, and I read online that this is something to do with it's kind of considered shameful to people in Japan, which makes sense, I guess. I mean, I think it would be kind of weird if people wanted to know about like Canadian delinquents, but I'm not really interested so much in the 3D as much as I want to understand the 3D so I can understand the 2D. And now I'm just kind of rambling and I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Do you have a favorite delinquent character? Is it a girl? Is it a boy? I'd love to hear it in the comments below. Honestly, I'm always looking for more delinquent anime. Mind you, I did study the crap out of this, like research, so I feel like I know most of them now. But maybe you can surprise me. Maybe even surprise me with your awesome taste. I will probably do some more videos on anime delinquents, or some lesser known anime types. Like if you have any you like or would like to see a video on, put it in the comments below. Please subscribe. Thank you guys. Goodbye. Please subscribe or I will beat you.